Normally here on BLRM we do wrestling reviews. I'm Behemoth, my co-host is Little Red Machine. But we just finished watching the first 8 Hellraiser movies, which is a classic horror franchise. And after reviewing them, we both felt inclined to give a review of the series and tell all of you how much it sucked. I think you especially hated it, so did you want to start out just with a general overview and then we'll just talk about the movies fairly quickly?
Sure. My first thought in watching these shows was, how the hell did they ever make more than one?
Yes.
It's a disgusting series. All they do pretty much do it is tear bodies apart, put hooks in them, carve out their guts, just everything that you would find absolutely disgusting. You do not want to eat or attempt to eat while watching any of this crap.
Especially if you like eating tomatoey foods, that would probably be ill-advised. I do have to say one thing before we bury the hell out of this series, and that's that the man who plays Pinhead, I believe his name's Doug Bradley, is a very good actor, and his portions in this where he was speaking were the highlights of most of the movies. But that said, I think that the movies themselves are generally just pulp movies, and they were more disgusting than horror. There are some things in them I liked, and we'll talk about them briefly as we go through the movies. But for the most part, I thought they were just gross out or just kind of... The last half, the first few Hellraiser movies, like say the first 3, are more about being disgusting. And then the last half are really kind of other movies with Hellraiser just thrown in somewhere in the end or in the middle of it.
So if they didn't include them as part of this series, you might actually be able to watch 2 or 3 of them standalone movies and enjoy them.
So the first Hellraiser was so gross that it would probably make weaker people want to vomit. There were parts where it's like, this is just so disgusting. Like when the body just puts itself back together slowly and just pulling itself out of the floor, and that happened again in the second Hellraiser. And the effects were great, but they looked disgusting as can be. The story was only minimal, and it was... The thing about the Hellraiser movies, all the way through the first to the 8th, and we didn't go to 9 and 10 because there's no Doug Bradley, and it was bad enough with him. If you take one of the few good things out of the series, I can only imagine how awful it would be.
You got a pile of turds.
Yeah, it's like if you took Jamie Lee Curtis out of Halloween Resurrection, which is already a horrible movie, how horrible could it possibly be? And that's what I feel like you could do with Hellraiser if you took the one good thing out of it. Just, ugh. But anyway, I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, the humans are the bad guys in Hellraiser, not the Cenobites. The humans are always the worst characters. And that goes through almost every movie. In the first movie, it's the brother of the main protagonist, character. Frank. He's horrible, evil, and despicable, worse than the Cenobites could dream of. And then they just come and... Oh yeah, spoilers on these old-ass movies for anyone bitching. I'll make sure and put that in the review title. But Frank comes back from the dead, and then at the end, the Cenobites get a hold of him again. But you're not... By that point, you're like, well, he's the evil guy, and then the Cenobites just kind of show up at the end. And they are cool-looking, don't get me wrong. But throughout, it's like the whole movie is just about how horrible the humans are. And then how disgusting you can make things and see if you can make your viewers vomit. And then we got the second Hellraiser, which is a direct sequel. We go right from where the first one left off. The only survivor of the first movie, Kirsty, is in an insane asylum, and the doctor is the villain in this one because he's trying to bring the things back from the dead. He's trying to bring out the Cenobites. And of course, eventually they come out and rip everybody apart, and he becomes a Cenobite and is worse than the other ones. And in the end, he kills all the Cenobites as they...
He becomes like a god.
Yeah, he becomes like the horrible Cenobite. They realize that they're human, and he kills them, and of course they still come back anyway because horror movies, and you have to churn out as many sequels as you can.
They don't follow their own plot line, their own storyline. That's part of the issue, yeah.
And that's true of most horror movies. Like if you watch the Friday the 13th movies, my God, they twist that plot to death. By the time you get to the 9th one, it's unrecognizable from the beginning of the series. But Hellraiser is no different in that regard. And we get the third one, and stop me because I'm just going to roll through them, and then you can rant. Okay. Oh, yeah. The third one is Hell on Earth, where they come back. They're like all stuck in this big cube. All the Cenobites are stuck in this cube, and they have to have people sacrificed to them. This was actually the first movie in the series that I did not think was dog shit. Mm-hmm. Because more Doug Bradley. I like Terry Farrell, the main characters from. I've seen her from playing Dax in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and I thought she was a pretty good lead. So this movie was okay. The first two I thought were pretty shitty and really gross. This one was not quite as gross, and even though the main character that she played wasn't the most intelligent, she was at least likable. Mm-hmm. One of the few in the series. Even Kirsty, she's kind of annoying. So Hell on Earth, basically, she gets them all back in the box at the end again. That's the thing. They go back in the box at the end of almost every movie. And it was okay. And then we go to Hellraiser Bloodline. I was so bored through this movie. Basically, it starts out in space, and then they go back in time talking about the origins of the puzzle box. And the puzzle maker didn't, the puzzle maker who originally wrote it, his descendants are the ones that have to come in and kill Pinhead. So Bloodline, descendant of the original puzzle box maker, who was actually innocent in all this. It was the guy who he made it for who was the evil fucker. And at the end of this movie, he kills Pinhead, and it's like the year 2100 or something. So, but it's really, really surprisingly, shockingly dull. The other movies, I would say they were gross, but I wouldn't say they were dull.
Well, they moved along pretty fast. This particular movie we're talking about, Drug.
It was only 85. It was only 85 minutes, and it felt like 2.5 hours.
Yes.
By the end, I'm like, how was that only 85 minutes? I feel like I've given multiple hours of my life to this piece of garbage. So, from this point in the series, at least all the way through number 8, all of the other ones are prequels to this movie. Because Pinhead just dies at 2100, and all the other ones before that are just details of what happened before he dies. Which doesn't make a damn bit of sense, but that was the only way they could pop out more sequels without rewriting everything or keeping it in space. So I guess it's better than rebooting it. They could have gone the Halloween route and had like 14 different dimensions of Pinhead, I guess. But anyway, so Hellraiser Inferno. This is the one movie that I will say I actually enjoyed. Because it doesn't feel like a Hellraiser movie. It details how this one cop, and what a horrible, miserable piece of garbage human being he is, and how he treats his family like garbage, treats his friends like garbage, blackmails, screws hookers, just a deplorable human being, and how he can't figure out what's going on in this one murder case. It just keeps getting worse and worse. And in the end of the movie, it reveals that he is trapped in his own hell world for all the horrible things he's done in his life, and he's just doomed to relive it again and again for all of eternity.
It's horror's take on Groundhog Day.
Yeah, basically. And it's actually pretty cool. And he ends the movie by saying that he now realizes that he has to atone for everything he's done, and he now feels the weight of everything he's done for the rest of his eternity, basically. So that one was the best of the movies because of the idea, the fact that it wasn't really centered around the kind of torture that the other movies are talking about, which is more physical. This is more of a psychological torture. So it's the one movie that I would say I would go out of my way to watch again.
It's one of the movies that I think would have been good if they just put it as a movie of its own and not part of the series.
Yeah, it would definitely have been. And they went back to it to a degree in the next one, but not as effective. Hellseeker, which is the one we had to look this one up because I'm like, which one is this? I remembered every other one, but not this one. So they bring back Kirsty from the second movie, and in the very beginning they kill her off, or so it seems. And this guy is going through the movie, he can't remember what happened, and it shows bit by bit that he doesn't remember all the things that happened and all the terrible things he's done. So it feels like the last movie, except there's a twist at the end. And the twist is that he's the one that died, and that Kirsty agreed to sell all the souls of all the people that mistreated her to the Cenobites in order to get her freedom. So it was okay. Really, I thought it was pretty boring and really jumbled through most of it because it constantly went back and forth between flashbacks and things. So it was very confusing, especially if you have a short attention span, which both of us tend to. But I did like the ending. So it wasn't a total waste. And at least this is one of the few horror series where she seems to live through all of them, unless she dies in 9 or 10. I don't want to go there. 8 of these was enough. Can you imagine how bad 9 and 10 would be without Doug Bradley?
Oh.
How brutal that would be.
He's the only redeeming factor in the shows. So when you take him out, you've got a piece of crap.
Yeah, and they didn't let him read the script, so he refused to do the last one. So it's like, yeah, I'm sure it's bad. I probably shouldn't bury the other people who play Pinhead without watching them, but it's just hard to imagine anyone else as Pinhead. And I'm going to rumble through the next 2, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more. Deader. This one was absolutely awful.
Nothing redeeming about it.
Conceptually, maybe it would have been okay. It was, but it felt more like a bad softcore porno. Mm-hmm. Like this reporter. So we went back to the reporter, like Terry Farrell was in the third one. Goes over to investigate these people who die, but somehow are not dead. That's basically it. She gets this video, and then she goes there, and there's some crazy ritual, and supposedly they found a way through the puzzle box that they are able to kill themselves but still continue living despite being dead. It's really weird, and there's a lot of flashbacks and confusing mishmash of stuff going on. And the lead character screams throughout like half the movie, and she's really incredibly annoying. And I'm spending the movie hoping that she dies because I just can't take the screaming and the whining anymore. It's just brutal.
You know a movie's really bad when you want them to just stop the bitch from screaming, okay?
It's like watching the Rob Zombie's Halloween because the lead character, Laurie, is so much more annoying that you're just like, oh, please just kill her just so she doesn't keep whining so much and screaming, and
please just don't even have to look and hear her.
Are just bleeding by this point. And that's much like what you get with Hellraiser Deader. And in the end, let's see, Pinhead kills everybody else except her because for some reason she's the chosen one and she has to come willingly. So she kills herself to avoid having to go to hell, basically. And then the guy just sends somebody else over there to start the cycle all over again.
Exactly.
It is a terrible movie in the vein of many horror sequels. And I would recommend that if you find a copy of it, you smash it with a hammer. Of all the Hellraisers, it and Bloodline are the 2 worst, I think. Mm-hmm. At least of the first 8. And I'm not even going to go over 9 and 10 because I don't know. I don't know what happened there.
I don't want to know.
It may be Hellraiser meets Hello Kitty for all I know, and it can stay unknown. And then we got the final movie of the series, which is Hellraiser Hellworld. This one, remind me. I know. I remember now. It's the one in the mansion where they have like it's supposedly in the real world. So it's like Hellraiser's take on New Nightmare, except done worse in almost every conceivable way.
Mm-hmm. Acting was poor. This plot line sucked.
The only good actor in it was, again, Doug Bradley and the guy from Millennium. What's his name? Did you have it on here?
I don't think so.
Lance Henriksen. Yeah, he was pretty good. The other main characters, It was better than the previous one, Deader, but only because it had to be.
Only because Deader was so bad that anything that didn't make you want to rip your hair out and scream
Hellraiser
was
Hellworld,
better.
if I gave you a good analogy for it, it would be a typical 2000 era horror movie, except with Pinhead kind of thrown in as he didn't even actually do anything until the very end. They just make it, there's like a twist, and it was really just the main guy all along screwing with them. And then because he's so evil, Pinhead is able to come into the real world at the very end, and then it just ends the movie. There are some things in it that done properly would have been better, but it's pretty stupid. And I would not recommend it, but it is better than Deader and Bloodline because it doesn't bore you to tears. But it is pretty stupid. So, what other thoughts do you have to add to this?
Don't waste your time.
Yeah, because I don't understand how it got past 1 or 2 movies. I guess if Boogeyman can do it, anything can, but for God's sakes, if you think Hellraiser is a classic, I have to think it's rose-colored glasses, or you have an affinity for torture porn. And if you have an affinity for torture porn, I'm not going to judge you. But if you like just a typical, or at least a more interesting psychological horror movie, don't go here. If you like people being ripped apart and tortured, and you have an affinity for Doug Bradley, which that part I could understand, and you might want to watch the first one, and if you hate it, stop, or just go watch Hellraiser Inferno because at least it's interesting. But for God's sakes, don't be like me and buy an 8-pack of Hellraiser movies and feel compelled to watch them, because at the end you're going to be wishing you were inside the box with Pinhead. In fact, it might be more merciful than having to watch most of these.
I'm going to do like the chick that they said she had to come willingly. Hell no, I'm going to take myself out just so I don't have to look at this shit again.
No, I wouldn't go that far, but I might gouge out my own eyeballs having to watch this again. So, Hellraiser is its own living hell, and the people that watch it are in the puzzle box. Stay the hell away from this movie. It may be considered a classic, but not all classics are worth watching. Yeah, fuck this movie.